like to share some thoughts on how I made this mallet out of wood. There are plenty of videos out there on YouTube showing you how to make this mallet. I use largely the same techniques that are out there, and I'm sure if you stumbled across this video you're going to see a bunch of others. How mine differed in some of the ways was the materials I used and the limitations of my resources in my shop, which is what I'm going to focus mostly on. The stock that I used came from pieces of reclaimed wooden flooring. I found with my table saw that I could rip it into blanks using the saw, cutting it on all four faces into these pieces of nice white oak. And when I did this, I kept thinking, gee, what could I make out of this? It's really pretty good looking pieces of wood. One thing you have to watch out for is pretty much every piece I have has a nail hole in it where the nail went down through the tongue and came out through the back. So I decided to make this mallet, and to get the size and shape and dimensions I used this old hammer that I inherited from my father many years ago as sort of a template. I like the size, I like the shape, I like the weight of it, the feel of it. One criticism I have, which I have with a lot of mallets, a lot of hammers and mallets, is that the handle is a little thinner. So when I wanted to make mine, one thing I had in mind was to make a beefier handle, which I did. So to talk about the handle, my blanks are a little over a ½ inch thick, and most of the mallets are made from 3 laminations of 1x stock, which is 3 laminations of pieces that are 3/4 of an inch thick, giving you a little over 2 inches in total thickness. Mine are about a ½ inch thick, so I had to do 4 laminations for the head, which put it at about 2½ inches this way, 2½ inches this way, and the total length is about 13½ inches. So for the handle, I glued up 2 pieces, laminated them together, and I discovered that it was about the right width already, but the length was a little bit tall. So once they were glued together, I ripped them a little bit narrower, and to come up with the taper, the handle is a little bit narrower in this part of it. To come up with that, I did it with a hand plane. I basically hand planed it across the grain on all 4 sides to neck it down a little bit in this area. And it feels okay up here, it feels a little better down there. This handle is about the dimensions of the handle you might find on a shovel, not so much a hammer. To get it closer to an oval, I used my router over here with a chamfer bit to knock off the 4 edges. I basically ran it down on all 4 sides. So it turned what was once a rectangle into an octagon, and then I had to smooth those edges, and I brought it over here to this little rinky-dink 1-inch sander. And I was a little surprised that this 1-inch sander with 100 grit paper pretty much smoothed this out just a handful of minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and it was pretty good. Then I put a 100 grit paper on it, and I smoothed it out even more. And this white oak is so hard that you actually don't get a lot of scratches in it. So it was pretty smooth right from the sander, even though I was sanding across the grain. Of course, before I finished it, I touched it up by sanding it along the length. Turn the attentions to the head. The blanks that I did were a little bit narrower than I wanted, so I had to edge glue a couple pieces together, and then I had to rip them to width on the table saw core. So there are 4 layers here, and if you look closely you'll see that each of these laminations is actually 2 pieces of wood glued together. To fill it with lead, I don't have a drill press, so I just used a hole saw and drilled out the 2 holes that way. To fill it with lead, I had some old plumber's solder that was actually made of lead. Of course, you can't use it anymore. So I snipped them into little bits, little pellet-sized pieces, and then I twisted it into rings, actually forming like a flat washer. but I still didn't have enough lead, so I took some old lead flashing that I had, and what I did was I melted it with my blowtorch, and I drizzled the melted lead into a bucket of cold water, and it formed these little pellets, which are kind of similar to BBs or lead shot that you might buy. And I use those to fill the two holes, and I actually use the handle of this hammer to kind of pack it in a little tighter. And of course, once I had the lead as packed as I felt I could get it, I glued the 4 layers together. Once the head was all glued up, I created a slight chamfer on the table saw, cutting the corners off, sanded it, planed it, smoothed it that way. I did split the handle of the mallet, and I cut some wedges to go in there. I did follow the procedure of a 2-degree angle where this end is a little bit narrower than this end to give it a little more mechanical strength. I glued it together with normal carpenter's yellow glue, and I think with a good tight joint that would be more than strong enough, although the wedges certainly add a little more mechanical strength. And finally, being white oak, I finished it with a tung oil finish, again an off-the-shelf one. This is just one coat. I could add several more coats to make the finish even more beautiful, but it is just a shop mallet after all. So I hope I gave you guys some ideas. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.